Hey! Hey! I'm Mr. O, here with another moment at the Children's Museum of Houston.
They have awakened from suspended animation. Driven by hunger, they devour their prey and then release toxic gases. Can anything stop them? Can anyone? Are we ready for the attack of the eukaryotic unicellular fungal microorganisms?
I don't get it. What's so scary about... Sorry. I just don't see what's so scary about eukaryotic unicellular fungal microorganisms. I mean, they're just talking about yeast, and while some do cause infections, they don't eat us like this. Sorry. But yeast are actually very important in making lots of different kinds of foods. For example, that bagel he's enjoying is made using yeast. Over there. And that concha she's eating was also made using yeast. And, right back there. And that French baguette she's snacking on was also made using yeast. This theater has a really strange snack bar. Sorry. So clearly, yeast are very important and they're just nothing to be scared of. Oh, come on, it's clearly the maid disguised as the butler working with the youngest son. Oh, spoiler alert. We better take this somewhere else. So let's break down that movie trailer, which did have several things right. First, yeast are eukaryotic organisms, which is just a really fancy way of saying that the cells that make up yeast are more complex than other cells like bacteria. Second is that yeast are unicellular, meaning that it only takes one cell for a yeast organism to be considered an organism. Humans are multicellular. We have lots of cells that all have to work together to make us. But yeast only need one cell. Third is that word fungal. Fungal refers to the group of organisms known as fungi or fungus. In other words, mold and mushrooms all fit in this category. But yeast are not mold or mushrooms. They are a separate organism, one of 140,000 that fit underneath the fungus category. Finally is the word microorganism, which means that we can't see an individual yeast cell with the naked eye. In fact, in one envelope of yeast, there are about 140 billion yeast cells. In other words, there are more yeast in this single envelope than there are humans. In fact, there are 18 times more yeast in this envelope than there are humans currently on Earth. And because they're that small, we need to use something special to see them, a microscope. This is Saccharomyces cerevisiae, or baker's yeast, the specific species of yeast we're focusing on today. Now, unlike certain cooking shows that use sock puppets to represent yeast, here at Oh Wow Moments, we use scientifically accurate... What are you guys doing here? Shouldn't you be on that cooking show, whose name I'm technically not allowed to mention, but it's about eats and good on that network about food? What? Canceled again? Oh. Well, tell you what, y'all can hang out here with me. So one scientifically accurate thing about these sock puppets is that yeast, when they eat sugar, do release carbon dioxide gas in a process called fermentation. And all that carbon dioxide gas gets caught up in the dough, allowing it to rise and get yummy and delicious. But not to worry, because the yeast, they died during baking. Sorry. However, there are lots of different kinds of sugars and sources for sugar, and well, do y'all have a particular preference for what kind of sugar you like? Why am I talking to sock puppets? Let's gas up this experiment. Science is fun, but it can also be dangerous, so always have a responsible adult helping you. We're going to test different sweeteners to see which one makes yeast produce the most gas. For this, you'll need baker's yeast, empty water bottles, balloons, warm water, 100 degrees to 120 degrees Fahrenheit, a teaspoon, a funnel, measuring cup, and different sweeteners. I'm testing corn syrup, refined sugar, maple syrup, molasses, honey, and agave nectar. First thing is to label your bottles so you can identify which sweetener is in which bottle. I'm testing 6 sweeteners, but you can test however many you want, including ones I may not be trying. Why so many sweeteners? because each one of these contains a different kind of sugar, and we're going to talk about that more in a minute. But what we're going to test is to see which one of these sweeteners helps yeast produce the most gas. Now, use the measuring cup to measure 1 cup of warm water and pour it into each bottle. Why warm water? Because the yeast in this envelope have been placed in suspended animation by drying them out. In other words, they need that water and that warmth in order to wake up and start eating the sugars. Now add 3 teaspoons of each sweetener to their bottle. Remember to rinse and dry the funnel after each sweetener so they don't mix. Add 1 packet of yeast to the first bottle, cap it, and shake it to really mix up the sweetener and the yeast. After shaking the bottle, uncap it and place the balloon over the top. Repeat steps 4 and 5 for all the remaining bottles. Add a package of yeast, cap, shake, uncap, and place a balloon over the top. And now we wait for about an hour. We gotta speed this up. In this time lapse, we can see all the balloons inflating, which isn't that surprising since all the sweeteners contain sugar, just different types of sugar. This is glucose, a very simple sugar. Corn syrup is composed of glucose, and glucose is the sugar that yeast directly eat during fermentation. This is fructose, found in sweeteners like agave nectar and honey. It's also a simple sugar, which is very similar to glucose. Yeast can turn fructose into glucose, which they can then digest. And this is sucrose, like in maple syrup, molasses, and refined sugar. As you can see, it's more complex than glucose and fructose. In fact, it's basically a molecule of glucose bound to a molecule of fructose. Yeast first break sucrose into glucose and fructose, then turn the fructose into glucose. That means 1 molecule of sucrose provides double the glucose. Since yeast can eat any of the sugars in these sweeteners, all the balloons did inflate. But the ones with sucrose, namely maple syrup and molasses, inflated more because sucrose basically gives them more bang per unit than glucose or fructose alone. The refined sugar didn't seem to inflate as much, and that's likely because it was the last one made, and therefore the water may have been too cold for it to react properly, which is part of the fun of doing science. Sometimes they don't quite work out the way you intended. And at the very end, the honey and the agave both exploded outside of the bottle. So we really don't know how much gas would have been captured inside of them, but they definitely had a reaction. But this is really only the start of your experiments. There's all sorts of other things you can test, like different sweetened drinks, or you could test artificial sweeteners, or you could change the temperature. There's all kinds of experiments that you can do with yeast, and we want to see what you create. So make sure to post all your experiments and results on our Facebook and Instagram pages. Plus, make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube to catch all the Mr. O and every other video the Children's Museum of Houston creates. And if you have a question or an idea for a future Oh Wow moment, make sure to email me at Mr. O, that's MRO, at cmhouston.org. And who knows, maybe we'll do another yeast-based experiment in the near future. After all, yeast, they just aren't that scary. But their manners are terrifying. This has been another Oh Wow moment from Children's Museum Houston. We hope your mind can come out to play.